Shadowbinders is back in stock on shopclownfish.com. That's shopclownfish.com. And now on with the show. Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
And you know your industry is in the gutter when the Japanese are making fun of it. When the Japanese are agreeing. The Japanese picked up on an interview with Chuck Dixon, or a video by Chuck Dixon, who wrote Batman to great success back in the 90s. He's the guy who created Bane, I believe, and he was on Nightfall, and he was the name I most associated with Batman when Batman was huge back then. He was going on about the American comic book industry and how it's failing compared to manga.
Wonder who's been saying that for a while.
I know, right? And the Japanese picked up on it. On their own,
I'm not surprised because, you know, we've seen them picking up on other things. And then meanwhile, while that's going on and they're agreeing with him and kind of like, you know, calling it out, you have people with like Crunchyroll that want Chick telling the Japanese how they should change their shows to come over here because, you know, you need to appeal to these audiences. Meanwhile, the audiences are buying up the manga.
So we're going to talk about this, what the Japanese think of our shrinking American comic book industry. The manga, even over here, is destroying American comics and sales. I mean, you look at the top graphic novels, and other than the Scholastic stuff, it's all manga.
Yeah, and that gets me there, too. They're like trying to argue, like, it's not true, it's not true. Our numbers are up. When you actually break it down, yeah, Demon Slayer itself kicked all your asses.
Yeah.
One manga.
One.
Yeah, you're doing great.
Guys, doing great.
Keep it up.
Keep it up. Yeah, I'm sure Disney and Warner are paying very close attention to this, by the way. So before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We're over 206,000 subs. We do talk about comics, talk about manga, talk about anime. We talk a lot about the business side of comics and anime and animation. And there's been a lot of talk by comics pros about manga. And, you know, I've seen a lot of the mainstream media outlets kind of trying to throw shade at manga. Either they try to throw shade at manga and diminish its impact on the American market, or they try to claim it as their own.
Right. They hate it until they try to count the numbers.
Yeah.
You know, here's the thing. Maybe, just maybe, if you stop changing everything and keep characters where they've been for years and just tell good stories and focus on good characterization and good storytelling over other things you keep focusing on, you guys all know what I'm talking about, then maybe you guys would pick it back up again. But you don't. And they're kicking your butt because they tell good stories with good characters and people want to read good stories with good characters.
Imagine that.
I know, right? So do better. Problem solved. Instead of getting pissed about it and yelling about it and being like, you're wrong, you're wasting all the time on Twitter, to actually try doing better and see what happens. I know, crazy, right?
It's absolutely bonkers.
That's crazy talk.
Stop talking. Oh my God, they're going to think you're Comicsgate.
Oh my, well, we're not, so suck it. Anyway.
I think Dixon is, but he's also got, look, he's got decades of success under his belt. And, you know, he's talking about the state of the industry. And look, if you look at all the comics he's written just for DC.
Then what would he know?
What would he know?
Go listen to the person who just recently came to comics because they used to write for a newspaper and they've written like 2 books. Listen to them. They know more about it than anyone.
Yeah. So again, Chuck Dixon.
Twitter will tell you.
Definitely has a credit. Now, this is on a Japanese site called Yuru Kuyaru. I'm not familiar with it. Seems to be a pop culture anime site.
I'm more thrown off by the fact it looks like it came from the 90s.
Yeah, it did. This looks like a 1999 GeoCities page here. But this is a very rough translation. I know Bounding in the Comics picked up on it too, but we'll go with the Japanese because I want to read some of these comments. Japanese comments.
Okay.
All right. Batman's authors, why the manga completely beat the American comics is too correct.
Okay, I'm sure they used to Google Translate on this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chuck. Yeah, that's how it translated his name. Chuck.
No, it's Chuck.
Chuck Dixon.
Yeah.
Chuck Dixon. Chuck Dixon, a major writer in the American comics world who worked on Batman and Superman, analyzes why comics hit American comics. Well, basically why, because manga is comics. right?
Anymore.
So, well, I mean, manga literally means comics in Japan.
Right.
So it's basically why manga hit American comics.
Okay. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was looking at the Demon Slayer picture.
Below is an abstract translation. Question: what are your thoughts on why comics are completely smashing comics?
I mean, manga.
Why manga is completely smashing American comics? Dixon, it's easy. This is because Japanese manga is full of the craftsmanship, passion, and dedication of the creator. It is a good part to say that it's almost non-existent in Marvel and DC. No.
They're too busy on Twitter yelling.
Right?
About politics and other things.
Unfortunately, there are no variations in American comics. There's no different genre. That's actually not true, but it's predominantly superheroes.
Yeah.
There's no work that each reader can enjoy like a manga. Okay. So manga is very diverse. We want to talk about diversity in comics. Manga, there's literally manga for everybody.
Right. And that's what I get when they get mad at manga. I'm like, manga is way more diverse than American comics most of the time. So I don't know where they get that idea that, it's not diverse from.
Yeah. I'm sure this is not actually what Chuck is saying, but
well, here's an actual version of it without the English,
Yeah, the translation is not good, but the basic vibe is that they're like, oh yeah, well this is kind of a duh from over here. We're looking at you guys and everything's politically correct and whatever. This is coming from Bounding in the Comics. This is what he actually said. He said it's not too hard to figure out why manga is winning. There's a lot of dedication, passion, and craft in manga comics, and that's missing almost entirely from the big two. Have you seen
some of the art in the books lately?
Yeah.
It used to be that's where you would go to find actual really good art to learn from.
Marvel and DC still run the store here. They're still the market leaders, and unfortunately, there's no variety there. There's nothing really different.
Okay, there's nothing really different in Marvel and DC. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Dixon touted the artwork in manga. It's not hard to see. The artwork is attractive. It's different. It's engaging. It's interesting. It's varied. So there are a lot of reasons to like manga. Yeah, it is. I mean, there is a lot more diversity in manga. Yeah, not a whole lot of reasons to like what's out now, because what's out now for the big two is poorly crafted. There are a few exceptions, but for the most part, it's poorly crafted, poorly conceived, and there's an obvious political agenda, which they do call out in Japan too. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about some of the comments here in a bit. He continued, I've made reference on these videos to one of my favorite mangas being about fishing. It's just about fishing. Not about vampires fishing or another planet. It's just fishing. They do this. We talked with Pinky Boo with manga. Like, we said before that manga is for everybody. And, they have, Prince of Tennis was huge. Mm-hmm. Yuri on Ice was huge. Cooking is huge. Yeah.
It's just, sometimes they put like fantastical elements to it. And sometimes it's literally just, fishing.
And, they've tapped into different demographics. Like basically manga has the audience that American comics wishes it had, and it's trying to tap into comics for everybody, but their idea of comics for everybody is everybody on Twitter. Mm-hmm.
They're not wrong about being very samey. It has been, and it's at least with the big two. And, now it's not the case when you get web comics in there and independent comics in there. You get a lot of really cool stuff and diversity of idea and story. But when you have the big two, it's all just like superhero.
He went on, the biggest problem here that I see is American comic book creators complain about manga.
Yes, that's what we've been saying.
Yeah, why don't you learn from manga? Why don't you look at what manga is doing?
That's what I'm saying. You know what? To do better. Problem solved.
They do. If they can't beat it, they try to destroy it. They use the media, or they try to claim it as their own, which we talked about. They don't
want to be told that they aren't good enough. They want to hear that they're the bestest ever and that,
Yeah, this is what he's saying that Americans should do to compete. He says, I don't mean draw people with huge eyes and lots of speed lines. I mean, do more varied stories, do more complex stories, put more effort into the artwork, put more effort into the craft, change the format, stop doing little folio comics and look at what manga does. These big fat telephone books, comics released weekly, things like that. Well, couple problems with that is, one, comics are more financially viable over there because more people buy them. And they also have teams of people producing comics.
Right, that's just it. Here they don't. I like her hair. It looks like mine.
It does.
The color-wise.
Persona, there we go. If they tried to copy it just like they did in the 90s here in the US, they get it all wrong. They don't know what they're doing. They have no interest. They're just going to complain about it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what's going on.
Yeah.
And they don't understand what makes it go. What makes it go is pretty much everything that they're not doing.
Yep.
And they're too busy on Twitter screaming about things to actually try to fix it.
It's so sad. It's a sad state of affairs. Everybody saw it coming. It had to happen. There has to be winners and losers. No, everybody's a winner. As the American comic book sales fall, something has to replace it, and manga's right there. Yeah, that's the thing. People still love comics. Kids love comics. They just don't like your comics.
That's just it. There's still people who want comics out there. Yeah, they just don't want, like they said, my kids know kids. My daughter reads stuff. I mean, they do. They like it. They'll read it if it's good.
Manga and Raina Telgemeier, basically.
Yeah, that's the thing she always liked. Not so much Raina Telgemeier now that she's older, but when she was younger.
But that's what she read, and they had access to all kinds of comics, know, and I don't even think they read our comics, to tell you the truth.
I think they have.
Kids that my kids know who read manga are just casual readers. They're not fans. They're not geeks. They're not going to conventions. They just like reading manga. Yeah, they'll pick it up in the library or something. They like reading it on their phone. They like reading it in books. And there you go. I don't see the mainstream big two ever catching up. There are alternatives, So, yeah, it's just really interesting to see the Japanese weigh in on it too. And they have a lot of the same complaints.
In English.
In English, I mean, it's hard to understand, but 500 comments, and they're basically like, American comics are all about political correctness, and, you have to be this type of person. It's all mandated, and all superheroes. You're not going to see fishing comics here.
No.
You should, though. We should do a fishing comic.
I don't want to do a fishing comic.
You don't
I don't know enough
fishing?
about fishing to do a comic. That, to me, is not interesting.
You do a comic about somebody who doesn't know anything about fishing learning to fish, and then you
Let
can learn to fish.
somebody else do that, because I don't care enough about that.
I don't give a carp.
I don't give a carp. There you go.
That's what you call I don't give a carp.
I don't give a carp.
That's our next comic.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. That would not sell well. Yeah, so this is interesting. I want to see the comments. There were almost 500 comments from Japanese readers.
Okay.
Let's see this.
Well, it'll be rough translation.
It's going to be very rough.
Warning, rough translation.
I think it's kind of funny, actually, though. After all, the United States is mainly based on European training institutions, unions, evaluation institutions, their occupations, and corporate society. What?
Well, because it's rough translation.
Not only American comics, but Hollywood movies are almost the same, from the story and the character to the composition.
Yeah, that's not untrue. It's like that. It feels like it's by committee half the time.
Sermon comics can't be sold. It's a good idea to post them in a conspicuous place in the workplace of American cartoonists and editors.
Yeah, this is not translated.
Sermon comics. That's what we're going to call them. We always said that
Sermon comics.
A lot of the comics are preachy. Sermon comics. You put them in the bathroom stall.
You're thinking chick tracts.
That's basically what they are. American comics anymore, they are chick tracts. Are you a racist?
Far left tracks.
Are you a racist? Read X-Men. American comics are self-regulated, where only heroes can be written in because they're regulated by political correctness, is really worthless if the appearance is diluted.
So that's what people. This is interesting to see what they think about American comics, because it's not true. They're not all mandated. They have to be superhero. I mean, the big two it is, but like there's a lot of comics in the United States that aren't superhero. But that's how people look at it from other countries. It's very fascinating to see how people think about, how they stereotype us, compared to how we stereotype them.
Basically, if you go through the comments, it's the same thing over and over again. Political correctness. If you would search political correctness, they're like, it's political correctness.
I can't tell what they're trying to say because it's so poorly translated that I have no idea what they're actually trying to say.
Yeah, they're basically like, there are no stakes. It's all political correctness. It's all mandated. Now, it kind of is. It is, but it isn't, because in the West, and we're seeing this with the Hollywood studios, they literally are mandating political correctness in comics. So creators can't tell the stories they want to tell. You're not allowed.
Well, that's how they're doing it in Hollywood too. They're mandating, certain guidelines, certain characters, certain types of people, and you're not allowed to do anything outside that. Not that you can't make good stories within those guidelines, within that diversity. But the problem is they're so busy. They're too busy talking on Twitter, not actually focusing on what they're supposed to be doing. I mean, that's what the end of it is. They're too busy trying to virtual signal and talk on Twitter.
You can actually trace back the beginning of the decline in the direct market to the beginnings of social media. It used to be everybody would post pictures of what they were working on, and then it went from that to let's stop working and just tweet. All right, we're going to wrap it up.
Yep.
Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.
Bye.